These three bundles of fluff are the chicks of a sexy, stunning and sensational bird, a marsh harrier. It swoops in to feed its young and gives us the look of an efficient hunter. What a bird, and what a start to tonight's Springwatch.
Hello and welcome to Springwatch 2021. It's our third week coming to you live from Wild Ken Hill on the northwest coast of Norfolk. We had a mission this year, and that's to show you a vision of the future, which is why we've come to this very forward-thinking farm, an area of rewilding and conservation, and it's paid dividends. We've had a bonanza of fantastic wildlife, and in fact, just a few moments ago, we were watching this. This is a marsh harrier, not any marsh harrier. This is a female, and if you look very carefully, you can see the drooping rear limbs of a leveret. And if you were watching last week, you will have seen that these birds have been flying up from the marsh, inland to the farmed area, and feeding on these leverets. Fear not, there are plenty of brown hares here, so there's plenty of food for these harriers. And this is the female, which is tending to that nest that you've just seen. And down she goes into the reeds. What a sight that is. Marsh harrier.
What a start to the programme. And as Chris said, that very bird is the mother of a brand new nest we're going to show you. And I'm really excited about this nest because this is a first for Springwatch. It's the nest of the marsh harrier. And there are the chicks there, and I'm particularly excited about this nest, not only because it's a first, but because marsh harrier numbers were reduced to a single pair in Britain just 50 years ago, and now they're thriving in wetland strongholds like here. It was Britain's rarest breeding bird, but today there are 590 to 695 breeding pairs, so it's a great success story. You can see there are three large chicks there, and they're 2.5 to 3 weeks old. Now, we started following this nest on the 28th of May, and you can see the young chicks there. They were about a week to 10 days old, and they've grown really quickly. This is them today, 2.5 to 3 weeks old, turning into real characters. Now, both parents are involved in the feeding, but the male will catch the food and will do a pass to the female. You can see the chicks already starting to do a bit of wing flapping there. And then they're looking up because the female is coming in with the food. As I say, the male will catch the food, pass it to the female, she'll bring it in, and the male can actually be polygamous, so he may have another female in another nest, may have up to 3 females that he will be provisioning. Now, at this age, the female will bring the food in, and as you can see here, will proceed to tear bits off and feed those chicks. But eventually she'll do food drops, particularly with smaller prey, and those chicks will be able to peck at it themselves. You can see that nest, it's basically just a platform in the reeds. So they're extremely vulnerable at that age. So the adult is on a constant lookout and then leaves those chicks. Oh my goodness, though, what a nest, and I just love those chicks. They're adorable, aren't they?
Yeah, they are. Do you know, way back in the mid-70s, I went all the way to Minsmere to see marsh harriers. At that time, there were just a handful of these birds left in the UK, and I wanted to see them because I thought they might become extinct. I never thought that we'd get to a stage when there were potentially 690 odd pairs of these birds, which just goes to prove you take away the persecution, maintain some of the habitat, get rid of those poisonous pesticides, and these sorts of birds can bounce back and play a vital role in the ecology of the UK landscape. Fantastic stuff. And of course, you've been out exploring that UK landscape and sending us some clips. What about this one from Richard Adams? Now what is going on here? These are tiny spiderlings, bright yellow, the spiderlings of the garden orb spider, Aranæus diadematus, and you'll be familiar with the females of those at the end of summer and autumn. Those are the great big fat spiders with those beautiful patterned opisthomas on the backs of their body, which make those orb webs, which backlit in the early morning light look absolutely sensational. But of course those little yellow jobbies there have got some way to go before they get to that point.
Ingrid Twickenham sent us in some little yellow jobbies. Have a look at these. These are eggs, and she said, who laid them? Well, we had to ask our expert, Brett Westwood, and he said they could be leaf beetle eggs, something like a green dock beetle. They lay little clumps of yellow eggs on a host plant. But as you can see, that plant is dead. So then he thought they're probably the eggs of a 7-spot ladybird. And you can see there, Dale Harding has sent a picture of that very ladybird there. So that's what we think now. They're a great colour though, aren't they? Bright yellow.
Yeah, it makes me wonder. They're so bright that if they were being sought by a visually orientated predator, they would be quite easy to spot, which makes me wonder, are they distasteful like the adult ladybird? There with its bright red coloration, its aposematic coloration, which is warning that they are distasteful. Could it be the same for the eggs? We don't know. But we can postulate, and that's what we like doing. We like stimulating our curiosity and our fascination and doing a bit of postulation. Anyway, enough of postulation. We've had a great start down here at Wild Ken Hill, but it's not all about Norfolk. We want to cover as much of the UK as possible. And on that account, Gillian is over in Northern Ireland, where today she's going to be submerging herself in the flamboyant beauty of the underwater residence of Strangford Lough.
And I'm going to be dipping into the underwater world and looking at a creature that's been around for 450 million years, the lamprey.
Gotta love a lamprey, truly weird.
They
animals.
really are weird looking, aren't they?
They are. I used to have an encyclopedia of weirdness when I was a kid, and
I
they
bet
were on
you did.
page 1, the lamprey. Remarkable story. More of that later. Now, if you were watching yesterday, you know we had that heartwarming story of our showdut brood, which emerged from that hole in the tree, which we'd been imagining what was down under there. They came out yesterday and made their way down to the marsh, but we had noted that there was another female still spending a considerable amount of time down in the burrow. Well, today I'm really pleased to say that first thing this morning she emerged from the burrow, and if you look carefully, so did initially a single duckling. She begins clacking away, producing that contact call. She's intent on keeping all of her brood as close together as possible. And after a stumbling start, a further 7 ducklings made their way out of the burrow. And off they go. The male has arrived to help protect them on that journey. As we said yesterday, 860 metres. It's quite a long way to get down to that marsh. And what's interesting is, as we saw with the previous brood, as soon as they're out and about, other ducks begin to gather here and show interest in them. Not entirely sure what that's about, but it certainly annoys the parents, and they spend some time not only trying to keep their brood together, but chase away those others. A bit later in the morning, they're well on their way down to the security of the marsh. Got to get through that nettle patch, through the woods, and they'll be down there. So, as we suspected, there was another incubating female down in there. So we've had 2 broods out of 1 burrow, and as far as the showducks are concerned, that can't be bad.
Isn't it amazing? I mean, I would now love to get down that burrow and see just what's going on. I mean, how many chambers are there? Wouldn't it be incredible if tomorrow another bunch came out?
Yeah, except that other female was only in and out. I think she maybe had been egg dumping there, or she could have been prospecting for a nest. The other thing was, of course, we saw that fox, and the fox arrived after the first brood had left, but that female we've just seen was still down there incubating those eggs or brooding the young, and the fox didn't go down. Lucky for her. But I wonder why it didn't take a chance and go down into its old den and scoff those ducks.
Chris, do you know we're in week 3, and although we've seen things hatch and leave the nest, we haven't seen any proper fledging yet.
Not proper, like full-on flappy fledge.
No, I mean, that's quite surprising, isn't it? But take a look at what happened yesterday with our whitethroat nest. There it is, 5 chicks in there, and you can see they're pretty fluffy, flapping away. One is straight off that nest. The others are looking a little bit surprised. I'm not sure they were ready to go, but they decide to follow. And although you can see they're flapping, they're clearly not flying off. So I don't know if we can say this is a true fledging. I think it's more of a semi-fledging. They're keen to leave that nest. That one's keen to get on its sibling's back and use it as a ladder. And they will venture off into those reeds, and the adults will stay with them for a while because, as I say, they're clearly not flying off. One of the adults comes back in, has a little look around. One's still sort of on the side of the nest, but it's not long before it also goes off. It took about 6 minutes for them all to go. And you might wonder what on earth that adult is doing. Well, it's actually looking in that nest for some parasites that it can have as a little snack. But it's giving us a lovely view, isn't it, Chris, of
yes,
the whitethroat's
not only
backside.
a white throat, but a white bottom too.
Which is absolutely charming. So as I say, they've all gone, they've semi-fledged, they'll be wandering around close to that nest. That happened yesterday morning. Just take a look at what happened yesterday afternoon, because this is what arrived at the nest. Quite tricky to see what it is at first, and then you can see that that's a weasel. First one we've seen here on the site, has a little look around and a sniff, but just like Mr. Fox, it's late for the party and it doesn't get its supper. So those whitethroats have semi-fledged successfully.
Well, hold on, you say it hasn't got its supper. They won't have moved very far. The weasel is not only a visual hunter, it's got a keen sense of smell as well, and pretty good ears. So if they make any contact calls to call the adults in, I think they're still relatively vulnerable.
I think they are vulnerable, but as we didn't have a camera on it, we can make our own ending up, and I'll let you decide whether they got away or whether the weasel got them. So anyway, our whitethroats have gone, but we've got another new nest, and again, it's a first for Springwatch. That was a common whitethroat. Take a look at this one. This is the lesser whitethroat. Very, very similar birds. They look very similar, but they nest in slightly different areas. Now, you can't really see the chicks. You can just about see their beaks sticking up there. We know there are 4 chicks. There were 5 eggs, so there could be 5 chicks. We just haven't been able to identify them yet. But as I say, they live in slightly different areas. They tend to be a lot more secretive, and they're in more sort of right in the scrub, in the hedge. And if we look at where that nest is, we can see that that's exactly where it is. It's in the rewilding area, bordering on the marsh. Very secretive, as I said, and right in that scrub, that's where the nest is. It's a beautiful bird. Not surprisingly, not as common as the common whitethroat, and it's busy feeding all of those chicks. Both parents have been attentive. But do you know what's interesting? Is that nest, Chris, isn't very far away from the other nest where the weasel was. So I'm not one normally to build up jeopardy, but there could be a little bit of jeopardy there, so we must keep an eye on those chicks and that weasel.
And you can do that yourself. You can watch all of our live nests from 10 in the morning until 10 p.m. at night, and you can reach those via our website. Let's take a look at what's on offer now, though. We've actually got more nests than we can squeeze on your screen at the moment. So top left there, we've got the marsh harriers, brilliant new addition. Top centre, we've got the buzzards. Lower centre, we've got red kites. Kestrels, middle right. It's all looking good, isn't it, really? Look, even the old partridge there sat on that clutch of, was it 17 or 18 eggs, still keeping our eyes peeled to see if they hatch. But I tell you, on account of trying to regain some integrity and also some finance, let's go live to our swallows there, middle left. Because yesterday evening, Michaela, I believe that you said that you thought the swallows would fledge today. Let me ask you a very simple question. Give me a yes or no answer. Are the swallows still on the nest?
Well, clearly they are,
no,
but it's not
Michaela,
the end of the day
simple
yet.
yes or no answer. You're not a politician. Just give me the answer, and the answer is yes. They're firmly back on that nest.
They are, and they're not flapping very much, and they're not looking like they're ready to go. But you never know. I mean, there are a few hours left in the day, so I could win that one because
they're falling asleep.
Okay.
They're falling asleep as we watch.
Yeah.
In truth, they have been out and about in the rafters today, and what they will do over the next couple of days is explore those rafters a little more, build up their wing muscles, stretch their feathers to a little greater length before they actually fledge. So the pound is back in my pocket, folks.
That'll be tomorrow. That'll be fledged by tomorrow, I'm telling you. Now, we've been enjoying all the wildlife above ground, but Gillian's in Northern Ireland looking at what's under the water. And it can be equally fascinating and sometimes even more beautiful.
I've been exploring the wildlife of Strangford Lough, both on the shore and on the surface of the water. But what about underneath? The project Sea Search runs regular surveys of the marine life here, and this footage captured by diver Dave Wall was taken just a few weeks ago. But you don't have to be a diver to find some marvelous marine creatures. I was just ambling along this pontoon when some strange shapes caught my eye. And on closer inspection, there are a whole series of tubes that make up this weird and mysterious underwater world just beneath the surface. The animals that make those tubes also live inside them, and they're called fan worms, or sometimes called feather duster worms. Now, the tubes are actually made by the worms themselves by bonding mucus with the sandy sediments from the seabed. And the tubes allow the animal to extend its body into the water column while remaining protected. And right at the top, they'll shoot out these feathery fronds, which trap and catch any suspended particles that are passing by in the water, any microscopic organisms. And when they do, little hairs, cilia, actually move those particles down to the mouth parts and are ingested. And the fronds also have very simple eye structures on them, light-sensitive organs that allow them to detect any passing movement, especially large predators that might be nearby. And when they do, they retract those fronds back into the tube as quickly as they can. The worms don't just create homes for themselves, they create a habitat for a whole host of other marine creatures, plants and animals. This complex structure on the seabed provides shelter, it provides foraging ground, even nursery ground for all these animals. It's just a little glimpse into a totally alien world. And it's not just life on the seabed, there's life on the pontoon as well. It's just caught my eye that there's barnacles and mussels and all kinds of seaweeds growing here. But the first colonizers will be a community of microscopic organisms, algae and all sorts of things that form a biofilm that allows the barnacles to then establish themselves, and then a whole host of other organisms can take hold. What a way to spend an afternoon. I could literally do this for hours. But the tide is moving in, and it's time for me to move on.
Tell you what, those fan worms are seriously cool. I've dived with them, and underwater they are so colourful, and just goes to show you how rich our oceans are. Now, by now, I'm sure you know that I'm up in the north of Scotland in the wonderful Allerdale Wilderness Reserve, and we've shown you the mountains and some of the wildlife. We've shown you the woodlands and some of the wildlife there too. But we have been neglecting our rivers, and I've spent quite a bit of time near the Allerdale River doing a bit of bird watching, a bit of botanising. But I was stood there thinking, I wonder what's below the water. Well, at the weekend, we went to have a look. This is the River Allerdale, and it's a beautiful, typically upland, fast-flowing river full of rapids and riffles and waterfalls here and there. And it's where you'd expect to find birds like dippers, grey wagtails, common sandpipers. And why are those birds here? Well, one of the main reasons is because there's plenty of food here. And that food will be in the form of invertebrates. And if you look carefully beneath some of these rocks, just have a good look around, you should find quite a few different species. Look at that, look. You see that? That'll be the food for a whole host of larger creatures. It's difficult for me to tell exactly what that is without a lens, but let me put the stone back and I'll show you something else that I found earlier on, which is even better. Just look at that monster in there. You see that? That is a stonefly. It's got a two-pronged tail. A mayfly usually has got a three-pronged tail. And if you think about it, that for a dipper is Sunday lunch. It's a big old beastie living under the rocks, and the dipper, of course, will dive underwater, it'll look underneath these rocks, probing around looking for things like this stonefly. And also found quite a few of these. Now these are caddisflies. This is a species that uses plant material to build a case around its soft body. I've seen dippers in the past find these, bring them up, batter them against a rock and eat that whilst leaving the case behind. These are using plant material, others will use little bits of gravel, anything they can find really. Cool little things, aren't they? Do you know what? I do love having a good old sprut in a river. And I always think, should never lose that childlike enthusiasm for lifting rocks and having a look and seeing what's underneath. And one man I know feels exactly the same is Chris Conroy of the Ness Fishery Board. He's a freshwater guru, and he sent us in this incredible film. He filmed these brook lampreys near Loch Oich, south of Loch Ness. And they're spawning here, and brook lampreys are not very big, about 15 centimetres long. What happens is when the temperature hits about 10 degrees centigrade, they make their way up these little streams to spawn. They find a suitable place, they move some of the bigger rocks to create a red, and then the female will latch on to one of the bigger rocks and vibrate. And this stimulates the males then to hang on to her, to squeeze her so the eggs come out, then they fertilise the eggs. And you see those little eggs in the background there, those little white eggs. She will lay up to 1,500 eggs. And then, when they've spawned, when all of that is done, the adults simply die. Amazing footage. Thank you for that, Chris. Remarkably, though, that's not the only lamprey footage that's been sent in to us, because Jack Perks, underwater cameraman and fish expert, he sent us this. Again, it's spawning lampreys, but this time it's a different species. These are river lampreys. These are much bigger, but 1/2 metre long. And this is in the River Dee in North Wales. And they have a different life cycle because the adults leave to go into the sea, where they'll latch on using this amazing mouth with hooks they've got. They latch on to big fish, to sharks, even to whales, and they'll suck their blood and bodily fluids. Then in November, they start the journey back upriver, taking advantage of the floods, and then they'll come up by spring onto these spawning grounds once more. And spawning is almost identical to the brook lamprey, except that the female in this instance lays 25,000 eggs. How amazing is that? And Jack told us as well that when he was filming, there were at least 200 lampreys all around him. He's never seen anything quite like that before. Usually you get 20, 25, 30 if you're lucky. And what's happened? Well, lots of reasons, but one of the main reasons for their declines is because of obstacles that we're putting in their way. We're putting weirs to block up rivers, and that is preventing them from making their way back up river to spawn. But it's lovely to see that the River Dee in North Wales is a good old healthy river there. Right from spawning lampreys now to the vast open expanses of the East Anglian Fens. And conservationist RJ Tagala, he's been on the trail of one of our most elegant, one of our most beautiful, and certainly one of our tallest birds.
There's a large bird that was once widespread across Great Britain. A beautiful, majestic bird with a haunting call. But sadly, it became extinct in the UK around 400 years ago. And the name of this village gives a clue to the bird I'm talking about. Cran is thought by some to refer to the historic presence of cranes. They were once common enough to give their name to settlements all across Great Britain, from Scotland to the south coast. Standing up to 1.2 metres high, the common crane was Britain's tallest bird. They love wetlands, and that's something they have in common with me.
Today, I work as a ranger in the East Anglian Fens, where important habitat like this is being expanded to create more space for wetland wildlife.
It's a habitat which was once much more abundant throughout the UK and provided a home to a whole host of wonderful wildlife. But over the past 500 years, much of it has been lost to drainage. This, combined with hunting, led to the extinction of the common crane.
But there's fantastic news. Cranes are making a comeback and are once again breeding here in the Fens.
Their return is partly down to the creation and protection of these vital habitats, but it's also thanks to a valiant pair who flew across the North Sea from continental Europe to the Norfolk Broads around 40 years ago.
I'll never forget the first time I saw cranes. I was in my late teens visiting the Norfolk Broads, and a group flew high overhead, and it was just amazing to realise that these were actually resident birds that I was seeing in the UK.
It was an incredible sight, their wide wings slowly beating majestically and their long legs trailing behind. Cranes also have this eerie, almost prehistoric sound to their calls, and that really captivated me.
In recent years, more European cranes have continued to colonise the UK, and breeding pairs in the Fens have reached double figures.
That might not sound like much, but for cranes, these are significant numbers.
Cranes have very specific requirements. They like an area that's got a little bit of standing water, because that way their nests are protected from predators, and that's taken even further by having tall reeds around to disguise them. So they like to be hidden away in a spot where they're undisturbed. But it also makes them really hard for us to see as well. And this time of year, when they're looking after their young or incubating their eggs, they keep very hidden.
Crane locations are often cloaked in secrecy for very good reason. As a returning bird to the UK, they spark a lot of interest. But it's vital that we give them the space they need to increase their numbers. 2 years ago, this incredible footage was captured on a remote camera in the Fens, a pair with one young chick. This year, I've come to see if another fenland pair will be just as successful, but I'm keeping a very respectful distance. Brilliant. This is a pair with young chicks. It's absolutely fantastic to be watching a breeding pair of cranes feeding their young here in this habitat near my home. Such a fantastic feeling. These chicks are about the size of a chicken at the moment, so they've got a lot of growing to do before they reach the towering height of their parents. Grazed grassland is a really good habitat for foraging, and this is really important for feeding their young because they can catch young insects, small spiders. I find it so encouraging that numbers are doing well, and to see habitat restoration enabling rare wildlife to make a comeback and expand its range. It's so important that habitat expansion projects take place, because if they continue to do well and increase in numbers, they need an increasing amount of habitat to support them. So they're only going to continue to be successful if they've got spaces to live, to feed and to breed. The UK population is now believed to have reached around 200 birds, and if enough suitable habitat can be achieved across the UK, the comeback of the crane could be as successful as the red kite.
Absolutely stunning birds, and isn't it great to see their recovery? And there's a rare bird here that I'm really hoping is going to follow in the footsteps of its recovery. It is the turtle dove. It's sadly Britain's fastest declining migratory species. But I'm pleased to say that it has been seen here at Wild Ken Hill, and Lloyd, who's the conservation manager, took this footage of it on May the 9th, so it's just arrived over from Africa. Listen to the sound. Isn't that a wonderful sound? It's gentle, it's beautiful, it's an evocative purr, it's inspired music and poems and art, and it's so much nicer than the wood pigeon's slightly irritated which is my impression of a wood pigeon. But it's not just the sound that's different. If you look at this photograph, you can clearly see that they're two very different birds. This was sent in by Jerry Brown. Much, much smaller than the wood pigeon, much daintier. The wood pigeon is quite a dumpy bird and much different markings. And as I say, a very, very different sound.
So,
Yep.
monotonous call, dumpy, you're really dissing the wood pigeon.
I'd like to apologise to all wood pigeons out there.
I rather like the
a
wood
wood
pigeon.
I like a wood pigeon, but you have to admit, turtle dove sound is a lot nicer.
Well, I know, but we don't get to hear it. We get to hear that monotonous cooing in the morning of the wood pigeon. I found it quite soulful, you know, I quite like that indeed. But as Michaela says, I'm afraid that the story of the turtle dove in the UK countryside is amongst the saddest of all. Because since 1970, since Simon and Garfunkel released Bridge Over Troubled Water, since Gordon Banks pulled off that remarkable save in Mexico with Pele, we've lost 98%, yes, 98% of turtle doves from the UK countryside. Why is that? Well, they are long-distance migrants. They migrate all the way back to sub-Saharan Africa, a difficult and dangerous journey. I'm afraid to say they are still legally hunted in southern Europe, Italy, France and Spain, despite the fact that their declines are similar to ours. But we can't absolve ourselves of some of that blame. In 1964, science showed us that the principal component of their diet that was most important to them when they were breeding here in the UK were arable weeds. But of course, since that time, with the industrialisation of our farming and the widespread use of herbicides, some of those arable weeds that were once so common in the crops have now got to the point that they're national rarities. And albeit the case that the turtle doves have tried to switch their diet from the weed seeds to cultivated things like rape and wheat, again, another study in 2018 showed that when they contrasted the success of the fledglings in the nest, they did better with those arable weed seeds than the crop seeds. So, why are they prospering here at Wild Ken Hill? Well, it's because the forward-thinking farming here is offering them an opportunity, because they are nurturing the very weeds that have disappeared everywhere else. Things like knotgrass here, chickweed, and particularly this one, fumitory, called fumitory because when you look down, these look like little plumes of smoke. And this is herbaceous annual, which produces tiny little seeds, one per flower, and those are intrinsically important for the diet of our turtle doves. They also offer supplementary feeding here. So this is a special mix. It's not the sort of thing that you would throw out in your garden. This has been blended to support turtle doves, and they will discharge this into the environment at the end of summer when they've got to build up their reserves and get back to sub-Saharan Africa, and it's paying dividends. And what we hope to see here with this rewilding project and the regenerative farming is an increase in turtle doves, as we have seen in other projects across the UK, like the Knepp Estate, for instance.
It's a real good news story if it continues on, isn't it? I mean, it's always a treat to see one turtle dove, but Chris, imagine seeing this. 5 of them in your garden, outside your kitchen window, while you're doing the washing up. And this was sent in from a lady in West Kent. What a treat that would be.
That is extraordinary on your lawn, isn't it, really? I mean, I was very happy last winter when I looked out one day and had about 60 wood pigeons on my lawn. But 5 turtle doves, even I, as a wood pigeon fan, I have to say that would trump it.
That is absolutely stunning. Well, from turtle doves outside your kitchen window to a fabulous island that is full of a variety of terns that Gillian went to visit in Northern Ireland.
I've come down to Strangford's harbour side because I'm told there's a very special nesting site. And to get a closer look, I'm going to have to get on board. A moored ferry in the harbour provides the perfect perch to view Swan Island. Although, ironically, there isn't a swan in sight. Now, at first glance, it looks like a colony of black-headed gulls, but in amongst them are terns. Now, there are 3 species there. Arctic terns have dazzling bright red bills and are marathon migrators, with some individuals traveling over 50,000 miles between the Arctic and the Antarctic every year. They are one of our most elegant seabirds, with long tail streamers, and some settle here in the UK to raise the next generation of intrepid travellers. Common terns also have a red bill, but with a splash of black at the tip. Despite their name, they're not our most common tern, as the Arctic beat them on numbers. Sandwich terns are the largest of the 3. They sport a spectacular shaggy crest and long black bills with a yellow tip. They're also long-distance migrants, making their way from the coastal waters of West Africa. When I was growing up in Kenya, I used to watch terns hunting off the coast of East Africa, and even now where I live in Cornwall, I'll see them occasionally passing through as they're making their migration north. And to see where they finally end up, where they set up their nests to complete that migration, is just really special. Just sort of completes the cycle for me. It's really beautiful to see. Strangford Loch is an internationally important breeding area for both sandwich terns and common terns. And in 2019, just on this tiny little island alone, 269 sandwich tern nests were recorded. But life on Strangford Loch has its perils. In some years, the tern colonies have completely failed. The National Trust have been surveying the area with camera traps, and they've recorded the culprits. Black-backed gulls and even otters. The different tern species benefit from nesting here together in amongst the black-headed gulls, as it means more eyes on the sky for potential predators. And when one is spotted, they rise into the air in what's known as a dread. However, what's really exciting is there is one pair of Arctic terns that I can see anyway. There may be others. And there's a little chick just hidden from view, but every now and again, its head pops up. This has definitely exceeded all my expectations. That's 3 of the 5 species that are found in the UK right here on this tiny little island. It's pretty amazing.
I do like an Arctic tern. I have to say I do like an Arctic tern. You imagine, it's not a very big bird. It nests up in the Arctic. It flies all the way down to the Antarctic, spends our winter there, summer down there, then comes all the way back up again. Amazing, amazing birds. I'm back at Allerdale now, and just a minute ago I had a herd of red deer behind me. Now I have the herd has gone. They've gone, but at least I've still got one. I've still got one. And actually this one, this stag, it's the stags, of course, with the antlers, is looking quite beautiful. But when we first arrived 2.5 weeks ago, they were looking really quite shoddy. And that's because they're molting now. They're molting from their long grey winter coat into their shorter, cooler summer coat, reddish summer coat. Now this is prompted by day length mainly, but also by temperature. And because it's been unseasonably cold, even up here in April and May, the molt is quite a bit later this year. But you've only got to take a walk around anywhere here and you find this. This is deer fur. It's quite coarse. It's grey in colour. You can tell it's the winter coat immediately, but it's actually quite useful because it's being picked up by a lot of the nesting birds here and used to line their nests. And we know that you've been seeing this as well because you've sent in some photos of nests with deer fur in it. This one's sent in by Annette Kiss. It's a great tit nest with some deer fur in there. And what's interesting is that great tits, if there's any fur around, then they will use fur. Unlike this one, this is a blue tit nest sent in by Julia Haynes. And usually blue tits don't use fur very much, usually feathers. But this, it's not deer fur in here, it's actually fox fur in there. Isn't that remarkable? And that reminds me when I was a little lad and my mum used to give us a haircut outside on an old yellow stool. I remember it now. She cut our hair and we used to look out of the window as the birds used to come take our hair away. Very useful thing, hair. Now let's have a look at our deers. It's still there. It's just going out to the way. But let's have a look at the antlers. Let's have a close-up look at these antlers. They're what we call in velvet now, and that's a layer of skin that helps the antlers grow. Now, those antlers are grown afresh every year. They shed the antlers at the end of winter, and then, thanks to the velvet, they grow back. The velvet is full of nerves, it's full of blood vessels, and those help those antlers to grow. They grow incredibly quickly as well, and full-grown antlers, believe it or not, can weigh up to 30 kilograms. Imagine that, 30 kilograms. That is 30 bags of sugar being carried on your head. Then towards the end of summer, the velvet starts to die back. The deer will then thrash bushes and branches to get the velvet off their antlers so that they are in pristine condition, the antlers and the animal, for when the rut starts in October. And these, the herd we've got here, they might be best of friends now, but believe me, when October comes, there's going to be some fighting here. Now, if you go down to the woods today, you are in for a very big surprise because you may well come across one of our fiercest predators. It's beautiful, it's ferocious, but thankfully, it's also very, very small.
Deep in the Caledonian forest near Abernethy, spring has arrived. And in a clearing, a whole woodland world has come to life. The creatures here come in all shapes and sizes. Some are tiny bloodsuckers, plump from their last meal. Others are armored and just passing through. Whilst this elaborate home has been built by one of the UK's rarest insects. Narrow-headed ants have colonized the clearing's edge constructing domed nests thatched with cut leaves and grass. They are space-age architects using solar power to heat their home. The south side is often flatter and larger than the others to capture the warmth of the spring sun. Workers are busy on the surface maintaining the nest. But a colony also needs to be fed, and some individuals must go on an expedition for food. This woodland world may be small to us, but for an ant, it's a vast landscape. And there are dangers lurking. Metallic beasts with hairy and powerful legs are on the lookout for an easy meal. For green tiger beetles, ants make a tasty snack. They may resemble tanks, but they're built for speed. They can run a meter in just 2 seconds. Even spiders armed with venom are wary of these ruthlessly efficient killers. The ants have lost one of their foragers. But the survivors press on in search of food. They must watch their step. In this lunar-like landscape, the clearing is littered with craters, and on closer examination, some contain strange subterranean forms. These are the larvae of the green tiger beetle, and are just as deadly as their adult counterparts. Busy foraging, some of the ants don't seem to have noticed. In a flash, the larvae drags this ant to a grisly end. The larvae spend about 2 years living in their burrows, where they anchor themselves to the ground. This allows them to throw their head out like lightning, grabbing unsuspecting prey with their mandibles. Occasionally, one gets away. This ant has had a lucky escape. Turning from prey to predator, these ants have come across an unfortunate woodland wanderer. This plump caterpillar has no armor and no defense. It soon swarmed. Best to leave them to their more gruesome work in this woodland world, full of ambush predators, metallic marvels, and oddities.
I absolutely love the colour of those tiger beetles.
They're sensational.
I know, that's what iridescent green and the purple legs.
Sensational.
Really gorgeous.
Got a
And-
lovely scientific name.
Go on then.
Cincindella campestris.
That is good, Cincindella. Oh, I like that.
Beautiful.
And where we're sitting now is absolutely prime tiger beetle hunting area. This acid heathland, which is, I think this is brilliant. Look, it's absolutely covered in these mounds. They're not made by moles, they are again made by ants. And these are yellow meadow ants, and they have the same purpose as the narrow-headed ants. They're basically their nests where they have their broods, and these mounds will control the temperature of the nest. They're very cool.
So what's going on with these yellow meadow ants beneath the ground? Well, they're one of a group of ants which use trophobionts. Yes, let's look beneath the surface now and imagine what's going on inside this ant's nest here. They are farming all of the aphids and the mealybugs, and they're taking from them the nectar to keep going. But listen, if you're not busy on a Sunday, how would you like to catch and weigh all of the ants living in 1 hectare of this grassland? That's 100 metres by 100 metres. Well, I'll save you the trouble. 165 kilograms of ants. They are a significant player in this ecosystem, and every year they shift 7 tonnes of soil. 20% of the area is covered in these mounds. So yes, they may be small, they may be tiny, but they are far from inactive when it comes to managing this area. And here they are beneath the surface, and look at this. Delicately, one of those little workers is feeding the queen ant, regurgitating that nectar it's taken from its trophobionts. But why bother to make these mounds? What's the purpose of this? In nature, nothing happens for no reason. Well, these are thermoregulatory structures. These ants want to maximise and optimise the temperature at which their eggs and their larvae develop. And I can tell you that inside here, they are 23% warmer than they would be if they were beneath the ground. So this is great news for the ants. It's also great news for other species too. These little bare patches of soil here on top of the ant hill are perfect for grasshoppers and crickets to lay their eggs. But here's a stunning fact. How long do you think that this ant's nest could remain in this environment? 150 years. Potentially 150 years. How could that happen? Why doesn't it get overgrown? Well, that's because the ants here probably, this is what we think, grow a particular type of flora which is attractive to grazing animals, here's the evidence, like rabbits and hares, which come to feast on this and thus maintain this unique landscape. So these tiny animals are in a positive feedback loop that maintains, as I say, this sort of area for potentially hundreds of years. What about that?
It's a fabulous little ecosystem, isn't it, that's going on right under our feet here. But of course that cycle of life continues, and those ants will be food for other animals, especially some of our birds. In particular, the woodpecker. Now we've got 3 types of woodpecker in this country. We've got the greater spotted, the lesser spotted, and this one, which is the green woodpecker, which is the largest. And this is the one that you'll see foraging on these grasslands, on these meadows, using that beak and its incredibly long tongue, about 10 centimetres long. It's barbed, it's coated in sticky saliva, so it puts its tongue into a hole and it will pick up loads of ants on that tongue. And as I say, you'll often see green woodpeckers hopping about this sort of area doing exactly that. Because as I say, that tongue is incredibly long. And have a look at this picture and you'll see just how long it is. Okay, I know that's a little bit random. It's Terry Hancock, and obviously we don't have meerkats in this country, but you could see the length of that tongue, so you can imagine just how many ants could be stuck on that if it managed to get it down one of the ant holes. And we've got some woodpecker poo here, and if I crumble it up, you can see inside. Those are the exoskeletons, those shiny bits. Can you see them? Can you see them, Chris?
I can. It's very satisfying.
The
I
ants.
love crumbling. I love crumbling green woodpecker poo
It's like making
on the
a
palm of my
pastry.
hand.
Look, it's like making a little pastry here. No, that's fabulous, isn't it? There we go.
And those are the legs, thoraxes and abdomens of all of those ants. What a remarkable thing that is. Anyway, time for a bit of natural health. A minute and a half of our mindful moment. We've got an absolute treat for you today. Yes, indeed. I've got to tell you that Tom Campbell has been up off the west coast of Scotland, Oban, where he's turned his camera towards one of the country's most dapper birds, the black guillemot.
absolutely mesmerising. And I love that flash of colour in the beak. Let's have a catch up with a couple of birds we haven't looked at for a little while. Our buzzard for a start. Let's look at the live nest there. 2 chicks. Oh my goodness, how they've grown, Chris. They're doing incredibly well. We've seen them do a lot of flapping. They've still got a couple of weeks to go. 6 to 8 weeks they'll fledge, and they're about 3.5 weeks to 4 weeks now, but we really have seen them grown in the time that we've been watching them. Let's have a look at our kestrel live. We've got 3 chicks in there. They're 16 days old, so I guess just over 2 weeks. A little bit more independent than those buzzards, surprisingly, because they're still in their downy feathers. Both of them should be fledging in 2 weeks.
Very briefly, let's go to our live sparrowhawk now, because we've got some breaking, forgive the pun, news, because we can't see beneath her at the moment, but earlier today we saw this. Look very carefully here at the egg in the centre of this clutch of 5, and you can see a tiny crack appearing. So it's clear that the sparrowhawks are starting to hatch. And here's that adult. Now, the hatching process in sparrowhawks, as I recall, is quite a slow one. I'm afraid we're probably not going to see all of these chicks out by the end of our programme. But nevertheless, it's a fabulous sight. Sparrowhawk there, she's going to go back on. What I like about these raptors is when they get back onto their clutch like that, they've got those very long, sharp talons, which they use for grabbing their prey. They fold them up like that so that when they go in amongst the eggs, those talons aren't there and they can never puncture them.
Be great to see one hatch on the last show on Friday. That's brought us to the end of the show for tonight. Busy show again tomorrow. This is what Gillian is up to. Gillian is on an expedition to the Copeland Islands to visit Northern Ireland's only colony of these, Manx shearwater.
I'm going to be turning my back on the big things and looking at some of the smaller creatures up here at Allerdale.
Now, there's always a furious debate about what is the UK's favourite mammal, but nudging the top of the charts is always a hedgehog, another species, sadly, that's been in quite widespread decline in the UK, but we'll be catching up with them tomorrow. Remember, you can watch all of those live cameras from 10 in the morning until 10 at night, so keep your eyes peeled, particularly on that sparrowhawk. Anything last minute you'd like to send to us, do that on social media. Other than that, we'll see you tomorrow night at 8 o'clock. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.